Apple is officially going after the gaming market on macOS. Gaming has always been a weak point for Macs compared to Windows machines, and Apple's new Game Porting Toolkit is hoping to change that. This will basically act as a translator so that games written for Windows will be able to run on Mac. It's like if you need instructions in English and someone's speaking Chinese, you won't have any idea about what they want. So you need a translator to come in and tell you like, hey, they're telling you to follow this channel, so like do it, bro. So will this kill Windows gaming? No, I mean devs can barely ship games that don't have a ton of bugs already, and this is mostly meant for single-player games like Cyberpunk, which has been caught running on an M1 MacBook already. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hopefully you are having a nice day. So what is the Game Porting Toolkit from Apple? Well, basically this is a new translation layer. Its purpose is to basically make Windows games run on Mac, because gaming has always been a big weakness of the macOS OS. Now, why is this sort of a software solution needed? Well, generally because programs written for Windows just cannot run on macOS. That's the usual situation anyways. Of course, you have frameworks such as the C#.NET MAUI framework, which you can basically just write one code and then it will compile and just basically run on anything. You have one code for Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android. It just runs everywhere. However, most frameworks, especially the much more feature-rich ones, like the ones that you use to make a video game, they just run on Windows, and they don't, like, you need different code to run on Mac if you want that game to run on Mac. So it's a whole bunch of extra work to make a whole nother version of the game to run on a different OS. And the way that I always like to explain this is to just imagine like you have a Windows worker who needs to get instructions in Chinese. So all the instructions on what to do, what game to launch, how to launch it, they will be written in Chinese. And then you have macOS that perhaps is a German worker and they need instructions in German. So the thing is, if you just take the instructions for the Windows worker, the German guy is not gonna know what those Chinese symbols mean. Like, he's literally not gonna have any idea of even where to start. But then if you add in a translator, such as you have auto translate on emails, for instance, then you can all of a sudden actually communicate. So will this actually kill gaming on Windows? No, for a variety of reasons. The first one is because there is a translation layer, there is always going to be some performance loss, logically, just because there's more things to do, right? You have to translate that Chinese into German, right? There is always going to be some performance loss. Now, it very much depends on how well optimized this will be, if you're going to be losing like 50% of your performance, or just like 1 or just like 0.1%, but you are going to be losing some performance. The other very big, very strong argument that I would give is that with modern games, developers pretty much are unable to ship games without being totally buggy these days anyway. The same with game updates. And now, even though this makes it a lot simpler to just put a Windows game on a macOS machine, it's still extra things that you have to do, and developers just already aren't able to deliver a game that actually works. So even though this is easy, it's just extra work. So like, will developers really bother? I mean, it depends on how many people are actually interested in gaming on Mac. Not to mention, this is mostly meant for single player games, because there's still a very big problem with these translation layers, and that is anti-cheats, because anti-cheat usually won't be able to run like this. You will need to put some extra work into anti-cheat to make it work in this sort of a way. And then it becomes a very debatable discussion if it's worth for the developers to put time and work into an anti-cheat so that a game that runs on Windows usually will be able to run on Mac. Like, is it worth it? Like, is the player base that you're gonna get on Mac worth putting in the extra time to make the anti-cheat? And then lastly, gaming on Macs is pretty bad. And why has it always been so bad? Well, first, I would say Apple was not really supporting all the developers all that well as Windows was supporting them, for instance. And then the user base of Windows has always been much higher, although macOS and Linux are really making ground over Windows just because of Microsoft's incompetence with the buggy Windows 11 updates. But yeah, like I said, mostly the reason why we don't really have games on Mac is because developers just seem like it's just not worth to them to make games for Mac, right? Like, there's just not enough of a community there to make it profitable for them to, I guess, just make these things. But hey, this is still pretty exciting. Sort of the same area as Steam Deck is doing with a translation layer so you can run Windows games on Linux. Now you have it on Mac. So Windows is losing its big advantage, which is gaming. So let me know what you think down below, and hopefully you indeed have a very nice day.